Hello, it's Adrian, your teacher of Grade Time 5. So today we are going to start Unit 5 of Grade Time 5. And what is it all about? It's about screen time, okay? So we've read a text about screen time, okay? The time that people, especially children, spend in front of a screen, okay? And now we're going to work with some grammar taken from the text, okay? So this grammar that we're going to be working now is the grammar related to obligation, permission, and prohibition. And it's a review, okay? Because you have seen this before in previous years, okay? So number 1, complete the sentences about the articles on page 49. Then complete the rule with let, must, should, need to, and not be allowed to, okay? So these are some words in English. We usually refer to them as modals, okay? And let's see some examples in the text, okay? So in the text, you can see this extract, okay? How much screen time do you let your children have? This has become one of the most challenging issues of modern parenting. Most experts agree that screen time should be limited and warn against allowing children to spend too long in front of one. So, should be limited. So here we have the word should and the verb be. Should be limited. Let's see the next example. Clearly, children can see the potential harm that an excessive amount of time spent in front of the screen might do. Furthermore, peer pressure means that they feel unfairly treated when their parents say that they have to turn off their electronic devices. So, their parents say they have to. That's another one. Have to turn off their electronic devices, which can lead to stressful family situations. And the next example is, many parents give in and let their children stare at screens for far too long. So here we have 2 examples, okay? 3 examples, in fact. We have should be, we have to turn off, and we have let their children stare at screens. Let's take a look at the book now. So here in the book, you have this, yeah? Complete the sentences. So most experts agree that screen time should be limited, okay? So here in this case, you have to use should. Should be limited, okay? They feel unfairly treated when parents say they have to turn off their electronic devices. And number 3, many parents give in and let their children stare at screens all the time. So should be limited, have to turn, and let. Okay, now that you have analyzed those sentences, let's see what they mean, okay? So you can see here, there is a rule, okay? There is a rule for us to complete here according to these words, okay? The words of obligation, permission, and prohibition. To express obligation or necessity, we can use have to, or what I have here, we can use must. Okay, so to express obligation or necessity, we can use have to or must, as in sentence 2. So here I can say their parents, they have to turn off or they must turn off their electronic devices. To say something is or isn't a good idea, we can use, as in sentence 1, should. So we can use should here to express that something is a good idea, should, or isn't a good idea, shouldn't. Okay, so it's a kind of advice, a piece of advice that you give someone. that it's a good idea to do this, that you should do this, okay? To express no obligation or necessity, we can use don't have to or don't, as we have here, don't need. Okay, don't need. And to express permission, we can use number, as in number 3, we can use let, as in sentence 3. And to say that something is not permitted, we use not allowed to. So let's see here a grammar explanation about this, okay? So here is the grammar explanation about obligation, permission, and prohibition. Number 1, we can talk about obligation and necessity by using must, have to, and be supposed to. This is an obligation and necessity. So if I say must, okay, it's an obligation. For example, you must get there before 8 o'clock. So it's an obligation. You have to do this. This is an obligation imposed by the speaker. So you must get there. Usually the difference between must and have to is this. Must is an obligation imposed by the speaker, whereas have to is an obligation imposed by someone else that comes from outside. Take a look at this one. We have to finish our projects by Friday. Okay, it's not the speaker who is imposing this, but it's something that comes from outside. That's an external rule. Okay, so you have to finish our projects by Friday. Maybe the school has imposed it, or the teacher, okay? So both of them, must and have to, is an obligation. And we are, let me see this here, it's better here. We are supposed to turn off our phones in the class. This is the rule, but we don't always follow it. Okay? So this is what we have here. Must, have to, and supposed to. Okay? Let's continue. Here. We can talk about no obligation or necessity, or no necessity, by using don't have to and don't need to. So when we don't have any obligation, we don't have any necessity to do something, you say don't have to or don't need to. Look, you don't have to eat this if you don't want to. So there is no obligation for you to eat this. We didn't need to buy food. The fridge was full. So there was no necessity because the fridge was full. No necessity to buy food. Okay? We can say something is or isn't a good idea by using should or shouldn't, as we have seen before in the activity. For example, you should leave now if you don't want to miss your bus. So it's a good idea for you to leave now. So it's a piece of advice. It's not an obligation, but it's a good idea. So you should leave now. I shouldn't eat anymore or I'll feel sick. So it's not a good idea to eat anymore. Okay, so I shouldn't eat anymore. So here it's not a good idea. It's not an obligation, something that I must not do, but it's something that it's not a good idea to do. That's why I use should or shouldn't. Okay, and number 4, we can talk about permission. Another way to talk about permission is to use let or be allowed to. Okay, so here let is active voice, while be allowed to is passive voice. Take a look. The school lets us use the tennis courts on weekends. So it's a permission. The school permits, lets us use the tennis courts on weekends. Or we are allowed to use the tennis courts on weekends. Both indicate permission, but the first one we use in the active voice. The school lets. And the next one, allowed, is in the passive voice. We are allowed to use the tennis courts. Okay? Is that clear? Let's go back to the activities in the book now. Before we go to activity number 2, let's take a look at this box here. In this box we have 2 other words, okay, to other expressions. Had better and be supposed to. Well, had better, it's similar to should. So it's something is a good idea and is often used as a warning. Okay, so it's a good idea, but I'm warning you that this is a good idea. The form is always had better plus the base form of verb. So the verb in the infinitive without to. Even when talking about the present, okay? And be supposed to, there is an obligation to do, okay, like must or like have to, an obligation to do something, but in reality, people don't always do it. It's always used in the passive voice, like allowed to, be allowed to, okay? Now let's take a look at this activity here, activity number 2. Let me do this. Let's do it in the activity mode. Okay, so activity number 2. I'm gonna do the first one and I'll give you some minutes for you to do the rest, okay? Let's see here. So their daughter can't go out after 8 p.m. Their daughter can't go out. So this is prohibition. So if I want to say allowed, I have to use in the passive. So their daughter isn't allowed. So she's not permitted to go out after 8 p.m. So their daughter isn't allowed to go out after 8 p.m. So this is not permitted. Okay? So now I'm going to give you some time for you to complete, and we are going to be back in a few minutes for a correction. Just pause the video, okay? Okay, did you have time to do it? So let's check. Number 2, our teacher expects us to raise our hands, so if we want to ask a question. So this is an obligation. We have to do it if you want to ask a question. Using the word supposed to, we have to use in the passive. So we are supposed to raise our hands if we want to ask a question. Okay? Here, their son isn't allowed to watch TV all day. Let is also a permission. Okay? To be allowed to is to be permitted. And let is also a permission, but in the active voice. So if their son isn't allowed to watch TV, they don't let their son watch TV all day. Okay? And finally, number 4. You should really turn off the TV if you don't want to get a headache. Here, it's a good idea, okay, if you turned off the TV, because otherwise you're going to get a bad headache, okay? So here it's had better is what we have seen before. It's a good idea. And it's like this. We had better turn off the TV if you don't want to get a headache. Okay? Let's check. Well done. All right. So here you have to know all of them. Yes? So you have to know that we have let is a permission. We have must, which is an obligation that comes from the speaker. Should, it's a good idea. Need to, it's a necessity. And allowed to, it's a permission, or not allowed to. The person is not permitted, okay? And we also have had better, which is a good idea, similar to should. And be supposed to, which is an obligation to do something, similar to must and have to. Okay? Alright. So that's the end of the first video. See you in the next video. Bye.